All right, today I am going to start a blueberry mead. Um, Over the past, certainly a few days, but definitely over the past couple of weeks, I've been consuming a lot of content to try to learn a little bit more about fermentation, distillation, things of that nature. I'm just going to stick to the fermentation side of things for a while until I can get, a good recipe there. And then, who knows what happens next. But I chose this recipe. I was watching quite a few videos last night, and there's a lot of people that do home brew, home fermentation, make wines, meads, things of that nature. Some of the recipes or the steps I found to be, well, some of them are more complicated than others, but I really gravitated towards this one particular YouTube channel from Brian and Derica at City Steading Brews. And what I loved about the content is that, and the way they make their product, frankly, is it's super simple, generally speaking. It's not super complicated. They just keep it simple. And I think for me to get into this, I shared in a previous video where I had some fails so far. I attempted to make an Applejack. That didn't go so well. I tried to make a pineapple jalapeno wine. I think I might have had some good alcohol there, but it straight up tasted like jalapeno and it was so spicy. So I ended up throwing that out. So this is time number 3 to try to ferment something. So the blueberry mead recipe from City Steading Brews seemed like something interesting. And I have some plans for it that I'll explore. But, we're quite a few ways away, quite a few weeks, certainly away from those next steps. First step is to get everything into my fermenter today and to start that process. So let me briefly go over the base ingredients. I will, in the show notes, in the description, I will include specific amounts that I put into my fermenter today. But the base fruit we're going to use is frozen blueberries. So I just got these from local grocery store. It's in a bucket of hot water or a bowl of hot water right now to thaw those things out a little bit. Everything I've read and watched suggests if you're going to use fruit, using frozen fruit is a really good way to go. Generally speaking, when fruits and vegetables are frozen right before they're frozen, they're picked at their freshest, and then they're frozen so that they're already fresh. Whereas a lot of times when we buy the fresh fruit in the grocery store or fresh vegetables in the grocery store, they're picked from their vine or from the tree or whatever, still a little bit green, and they ripen through transport and storage. So a lot of folks claim that the freshest fruits and vegetables you can get, aside from picking it from the tree yourself, might be in frozen varieties. So the other thing about using frozen fruit is the freezing process starts to break down the skins, which is something that you want whenever you're fermenting. Again, remember, yeast is going to eat sugar to create alcohol. That's the whole idea behind fermentation. For the most part, I'm going to follow the recipe that Brian and Derica provided. And again, I'm going to include that link to that video so you can see what they did as well. The one deviation I'm going to have is, instead of using water, I'm going to use apple juice or apple cider. And whenever you use a fruit juice, one thing I've learned is to make sure that it doesn't have any preservatives in it. Common preservative in a lot of juices is something called potassium sorbate. There are others, but my understanding is those preservatives have a negative effect on the yeast. And obviously, you want your yeast to work. You want it to gobble up all that sugar. So if it's getting killed by these preservatives, then you're not going to have a very successful fermentation. One thing I also learned is sugar is very important to fermentation. So we're going to use this. But the ingredients of this is simply apple cider, pasteurized apple cider, and ascorbic acid, which ascorbic acid is just another way of saying vitamin C. The other thing that City Steady Brews suggested was using a black tea to give some tannins to the mead. The base of a mead is also going to include honey. And, I've never made a mead. I've had a few over time. The flavor profile sounded interesting to me, and especially, here in a few weeks, once fermentation's done and I start to rack and all those sorts of things, I have a couple things that I want to experiment with as well. If, white oak barrel behind me. I might be using that with this product if it turns out okay. Other ingredients, I'm going to put the peel of a lemon. So they say zest. I'm not technically going to zest it. I'm going to have some pretty good sized chunks. Zesting oftentimes leaves really fine grain particles, and I want it to be a little bit bigger chunks. As far as the yeast is concerned, I'm going to use Lalvin. Hope I'm saying that right. EC-1118. I believe this is a wine yeast. My understanding is that this has the potential to yield up to 18% alcohol, of course, depending on your other ingredients. So I'm going to use a packet of that. My understanding is one of these packets is technically good for 5 gallons, but everyone, or most folks say, just put the whole packet in. No harm in using more yeast to let it gobble up all the sugar. I'm going to put the fruit and the zest also in a brew bag, try to contain the material, the solids, so that whenever it's time to the fermentation's over, it's going to be easy to remove that. Let's see, what else do we have here? Oh, I also have some yeast nutrient that I'm going to use just to help that yeast be more active in the process. And I think I've covered the ingredients. Yeah. I got the, you can get this yeast just about anywhere. I mean, you can get it from your local hot fermentation brewing stores. I got some from Butler Winery. They have a shop downtown Bloomington. I'm using this 2-gallon plastic fermenter. You notice there's a little bit of a gasket and an opening there. That gasket allows you to put an airlock inside. A couple of varieties that I found. I don't have a strong opinion, honestly, one way or the other. From everything that I've read and watched, both are equally effective. Basically, you're going to fill some fluid into your airlock, depending on which one you use, and that creates that vapor barrier. But then the CO2 that's produced as a byproduct of fermentation will gas off over time. So you're creating more or less a sealed environment. The other thing I thought was interesting through some of the content that I watched yesterday is that a lot of folks put, instead of water or anything in their airlock, they'll put like a vodka or some sort of spirit in there. And sometimes they'll even use the cleaning solution that they use to sanitize. So I don't know, I'll probably put a little bit of vodka in there. That way it keeps everything clean. And that's, I guess, my last point before I'm going to pause and get everything batched in and ready to go. Sanitization is emphasized in every one of these fermentation videos. Make sure everything is super sanitized. So I got this Be Bright cleanser from Butler Winery, and we're going to sanitize all of our equipment. I'm not going to take you through the whole process. It's pretty boring, but just know when I come back, we're going to be putting everything inside in our fermenter and start the process. So stay tuned. I'll be right back. Okay, so we're back. I've got the honey, the apple juice, the tea. I've got the blueberries and lemon zest in a bag. Been mixing it up. I put the yeast nutrient in. So now I want to get an initial specific gravity reading. And I've seen lots of little tricks. I just thought the simplest thing, albeit I don't know how clean or not clean or messy it's going to be, is to use a turkey baster to fill my cylinder, and then we're going to put this in. So let's put some of our fluid in. Looks like I'm going to make a little bit of a mess. I guess that's part of the process, so I do that a few more times. The idea behind getting a specific gravity measurement initially gives you some indication of how much sugar is left or in here for your yeast to consume. And there's lookup tables. I haven't studied the math behind it. It's pretty easy. There's quite a few websites where you can simply just enter in the details of your initial specific gravity and put it into the calculation and determine what the amount is. So, boy, this is trickier to read than I thought. Let me see if I can get the right reading here. Well, I think this is telling us that we should be able to produce about a 18%. So we're at a 1.10. That's good. That means there's a lot of sugar in here to consume. So 1.100 is the initial specific gravity. So now that we have that step, I'm going to take this. Well, we'll just set this aside for right now. And again, I've been doing my best to keep everything clean and sanitized as possible. So that is that. We'll give it a few more stirs here. The idea, I'm about to put the lid on and put an airlock. And for fermentation to work, I've watched and read quite a few different theories on this. I've read some folks that say the primary fermentation, to leave it open, to cover it with a cheesecloth. And then I've seen just as many other folks that have said, put the lid on, put the airlock, you're good to go. So I'm going to put the lid on and put the airlock on. Now, I forgot to bring my vodka to put in my airlock. I'll get that here in a moment. But we're going to throw this yeast in, and then I think we're going to call it done for the first step. Now, this fermentation process, there's no absolute science behind it. As far as the time that it takes, it could be, as some folks say, a few days, but generally speaking, I expect it to be a good week or so, maybe even 10 days. So just trying to prevent any of the yeast from getting inside. So it's going to be hard for me to tip up my fermenter to show you, and I'm trying to make sure I get as much off of here as possible. I don't want to leave that yeast there, so let's pour our turkey baster again. Maybe we can get below and clean off our handle, our spoon, all those little yeast, happy yeast. All right, so at this point, I am going to put the lid on, put the airlock. I'm just going to put it in here ready to go, and then, like I said, I'll get the spirit or whatever here in a moment. So we're just going to pop this airlock in this hole. Now, the other day I did this and I pushed through a grommet. Don't want to do that necessarily. So these plastic fermenters, they're relatively inexpensive. They're pretty easy to use. I do set mine inside a bigger bucket in case it bubbles over. So let me pause one moment, and then actually, I'm just going to go ahead and end the video right here. Like I said, I got to put some liquid in this bubbler to create that airlock, and now I just need to let this do its work. So it'll be probably a week, 10 days or so before I'm able to, or before I'm going to report to you what I'm finding and what I'm discovering. So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope the yeast does its job.